Line's good.
Never on!
Whoa.
Hard! Hardly.
Come on, Brent.
Line's good.
Got real close.
The hair high, right?
Try and hit 2/3.
Have they saved it for her? Yes, they have.
Ooh, welcome to Game of Stones, everybody. I am Sean Graham. Scott alongside, as always. Hello, Scott.
Hey, Sean. Oh, you really, you really woke me up there. That was a big intro.
Hey, coming in hot on a Monday afternoon as we record this. A beautiful day here in the nation's capital on Thanksgiving. Scott, have you been outside yet to enjoy what is a truly spectacular fall day here?
Of course, yeah. I'm already at almost 8,000 steps for the day. Did a little walk by the Ottawa River around the War Museum and back. It's pretty nice this time of year, the foliage out in full force. And as you mentioned, yeah, it's a beautiful day. Not too hot, not too cold, just perfect.
Yep. Yeah, it really is spectacular. The last day where the Queen Elizabeth Drive will be closed here in Ottawa, which goes right along the Rideau Canal, and the colors are out. It really is just an amazing time of year. Certainly one of my favorites. It is Thanksgiving here in Canada, so happy Thanksgiving to all of our Canadian friends. And for those of you who aren't in Canada and aren't celebrating Thanksgiving today, happy Monday. Hopefully you're having a wonderful day at work if you are at work. So, Scott, let's talk about what happened this weekend. I don't remember the Grand Slams having an event on Thanksgiving. Is this new? Is this the first time this has happened?
Yeah, I don't remember it either. So it might be new. I feel like last year it was always the end of October, but who can remember? They all bleed together, right?
They do. They are all the same. So they did have the Boost National this weekend in North Bay, Ontario at the beautiful Memorial Gardens, home of, I think they're still called the Battalion. They're in North Bay of the OHL. And Scott, it was quite a weekend with Silvana Tirinzoni and Brad Gushue coming out on top at the end of the week. Two finals yesterday. Let's talk big picture before we get into some of the specifics that we want to discuss. Anything stand out for you from what you saw over the course of the week?
Some things stood out. The Swiss men's team, Michael Brunner making the playoffs. Pretty good showing for them. Corey Dropkin, they came out pretty strong this week. So good for them. On the women's side, Rafaela Kaiser, I think, was the one that sort of surprised everybody, turned some heads. Otherwise, not too many surprises and names that I think we gave pretty good odds to be in the finals and win when we did our preview last week.
Yeah, so Gushue beats Nika Dean and Silvana Tirinzoni beats Carrie Anderson, and those four teams would have had pretty high odds in our odds maker game last week. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I agree. Some nice runs there. Unfortunate for Corey Dropkin and his team, the way their run ends, losing 11-0 to Brad Gushue in the final. Team Kaiser, they lost in the quarterfinals to Anderson. So it was pretty interesting. Really congested standings on the women's side where you have three tiebreaker games. So that Saturday morning slot was full with three women's games, one men's game, excuse me. And you had a shutout too in that tiebreak where Jennifer Jones beat Chelsea Carey 6-0. So it was a full Saturday for those teams who had to go through that draw in the morning, 8 a.m. on Saturday morning. Good God, I was not awake when those games started.
Yeah, and you'll notice none of them made it, made it past the semifinal. So
yeah,
for Caitlin Laws to come out and play her third game against Tirinzoni, pretty tough.
But you're starting literally 12 hours after the first game is the semifinal. Like that's such a long day.
Yeah, it's like our club bonspiels,
Yeah.
Yeah, but some surprises the other way. Bruce Mowat had the highest chance on my scorecard here of winning and didn't make the playoffs. So there's that. Rachel Homan's team losing out in that quarterfinal to Caitlin Laws. That's sort of the surprising ones on the other side. And of course, Anna Hasselberg struggling and not making the playoffs. So a few surprises on the opposite side from the nice surprises that we saw as well.
Yeah, so you mentioned Maui. We should note that I think it was Bobby Lammy. It could have been Hammy McMillan too, but I think it was Bobby Lammy had a broken hand or has a broken hand. And Bruce Mount was sweeping over the course of the week. So with all due respect to Bruce Mount, that is obviously a downgrade on your sweep game to go from Bobby Lammy to Bruce Mount. So a tough situation for that team. Hopefully the hand improves by the next time we see them. And certainly you would hope by the European Championship that he's 100% to be able to sweep and get back to that top form that team's in. But yeah, you certainly don't expect them to go 1-3 over the course of the week. Maybe a bit of a surprise with Yannick Schwaller as well, going 1-3. That's a surprise to me. I know we didn't give them the best odds, but that's a good team, and that they'll be heard from later in the season, you'll think. And yeah, like you say, Hasselberg being down there. I was surprised too. Krista McCarville at 1-3. I thought they'd get a nice boost from the Northern Ontario crowd. So a little disappointing to see them there at 1-3. But overall, it seemed like a fun week. Scott, we have some curious strategy things to talk about, though. This is one of the things that I like to get into some of the specifics of these games when we have the opportunity to. So let's go in the order in which I think they're the most interesting. And let's talk about the seventh end of the men's semifinal between Matt Dunstone and Nicholas Sedin. This was a low-scoring game. It's 3-1 for Nicholas Sedin in the seventh end, and Matt Dunstone has the hammer. So the situation when Nicholas Sedin goes to throw his first stone is that there is a corner guard belonging to Matt Dunstone above the 9 o'clock position in the house. And Matt Dunstone has a rock pretty much at noon, or in the 4 foot, high 4 foot, 8 foot area in there. So those are the only two rocks in play. Nicholas Sedin decides to draw around the corner guard and continue to allow Matt Dunstone to sit one. And then Matt Dunstone hits it out. And then Nicholas Sedin decides to play the double, which was left. And then Matt Dunstone blanks. So this was a very lengthy discussion in the booth because essentially by drawing behind, what Nicholas Sedin is trying to do is bait Matt Dunstone into taking two so that the game is tied and Nicholas Sedin has the hammer coming home. But then after Dunstone hits it, Nick Sedin could very easily have hit one of them and either tried to roll back behind the guard. He could have even rolled out and say, hey, Matt Dunstone, take your two. Then it would have been a very curious decision for Matt Dunstone. Does he actually take the two, or does he just hit his own out and take the blank, which he could have done? But Scott, this was a rather interesting, I thought, moment in this game of what do you want? Because it used to be, do you want to be down one with the hammer versus up one without? Now it seems to be two. Like the math of this is now changed, where do you want to be down two with the hammer or up two without? And Nicholas Sedin clearly felt more comfortable in a tied game than being up by two.
Yeah, which is strange, right? Like in a game, especially like this one, that finished 3-3.
Yeah,
it's not like both teams were putting up huge scores. So it's a little strange for me to think that Nicholas Sedin wanted him to take the two and then shifted gears, right? Like,
right.
If you say, okay, we're okay with him taking two, then like you mentioned, just hit one and give Matt Dunstone put the pressure back on him to make that decision. Being up two without, I think is like really good. There's been, I haven't looked at the analytics so far from last year, but before that, it was like a 90 something % chance that you win when you're up one without, right? So being up two without, I'd imagine would be even more of a % chance that you win. What ended up happening is that Dunstone got his 2 in the 8th. So it was just like the same thing happened, but an end later.
This is where I think it gets even more interesting, is that Nicholas Dean got lucky in the 8th end, that Matt Dunstone played the Mark Dacey strategy in the 8th end. There's a whole jumble of things in the 4-foot above the tee line, and Matt Dunstone on, I think, BJ Neufeld's first, they have a long discussion of what do? Do you come behind a corner again? Or do you try to come behind everything, or do you try to tap some of the stuff in the 4-foot around? And ultimately they decide to come around the junk because there's no angle the way the rocks are. And when Matt Dunstone went to throw his first stone, 7 minutes later, he was well set up for the 3. Like the stone that BJ Neufeld threw deep was perfect. And then through the rest of the end, Matt Dunstone has a hit, and if he rolls over to the 3 o'clock position, then Nick Dean has not a great angle on a long double to, for his sake, hopefully just make a tie. Like they played that end really well to set themselves up for a 3. And we've seen Kevin Cooey do this before, where he has intentionally given up a steal in the 7th or the 9th end to be down 2 rather than be tied without. He'd rather be down 2 with than tied without is the math that he's played with. And this was a situation too, where if Matt Dunstone makes his shot, now he misses it, not a terrible miss, he just didn't roll far enough. And it was a pretty simple double for Nick Dean that he almost squeezed through to like a double and then freeze on the back one that would have really been disastrous for Matt Dunstone. Didn't come far enough. He still had a tricky shot, but he made it for the 2. But that seems to be the math now for these teams, that they would rather be down the 2 because you have a chance to get the 3. And with the 5 rock rule, the other team can't hit until their 4th stone. Whereas if you're trying to steal, the other team can hit on their 3rd stone. And that's a huge difference. So when the other team is going to be playing defensively, you can kind of guarantee your 2 in the last end, but keeping the hammer seems like, oh, you're good. You might be able to crack a 3 too. So that like 5% chance that you crack a 3 is worth it because it's basically an extra chance to win the game in essence. And that seems to be how they're playing it.
Well, yeah, that must be it, Sean. Like it does seem that's the decision that the teams are making. They're not settling to take their 1 and try and steal, or even just be tied without, or tied with even is not as ideal as it used to be, it would seem.
But again, that's what Nick Dean was playing for. He was playing for tied with, right?
Okay. Yeah,
right. He wanted Dunstone to take the 2 and 7 so that he could be tied with coming home.
The hammer coming home.
Yeah, that's what he was playing for. And because he was late enough in the end too. And so I think this is part of the math, is like you don't start the end this way, but you're late enough in the end that the best he can do is 2. So you're just like, all right, go for it, pal. Like you can't get 3 now. So that risk is totally off the table. Yeah, maybe you don't play the whole 7th end, being like, the way we joke about Russ, like, oh, you force him to 2. Like he was literally trying to force him to 2. And yeah, maybe you don't play the whole end that, I don't know if reckless is the right word, but that, leaving their stones around. But late in the end, when it's not going to hurt you, or at least you're not going to go down, then maybe it's worth it,
Then maybe, yeah, no, absolutely, something to watch the rest of the season.
Yeah. Now, what was particularly curious about it in the moment was the switch, though, that Nick Dean on his first one there in 7 plays the draws, trying to get him to take the 2, and then he plays the double. That's what I was curious about, and that's what I kind of wish I realize we could have potentially driven to North Bay, but that's like a post game question that I would have been interested in asking Nick Edin.
Mhm.
Like, why switch gears, drawing first and then playing the double? And then, just as interestingly, I would have been very curious to ask Matt Dunstone, what would you have done if
Yeah.
Edin had just hit one and you were sitting there, and if mostly if he rolls out, like if Nick Edin hits one and rolls out, would you have drawn for two, or would you have peeled your own out for the blank?
Yeah. That's a great what if to what would have happened. And conversely as well, like I wonder if Edin ever contemplates giving him 3 there and then being 1 down with the hammer.
Yeah, that's even gutsier.
Yeah. Maybe try to play another draw, tuck it around one of them and make him play a run for 3 or something. Anyway.
Yeah, but it is something to keep our eyes on now, sort of this late game scenario where it used to be up 1, down 1, hammer on either side. Now it's 2. And we've seen it more on the men's side. The women's teams haven't been going to the strategy nearly as frequently, if at all, that I've seen. But on the men's side, some of these teams are really picking up on this and feeling comfortable having that last rock down 2 with the hammer.
Absolutely.
Should note though, neither situation is good for you. Like, you don't like being down 2 with the hammer. You're still going to lose more often than not. Being tied without the hammer, you're also going to lose more often than not. Like, neither situation is good for you. You should try to have the lead late in the game.
Yeah, it's just what's the less worse.
Yeah. So that was one strategy decision that was quite interesting. The other one came in the women's final yesterday between Carrie Anerson and Silvana Tirinzoni. And this came in the 4th end, and it was Val Sweeting's either first or second one. I don't remember. But essentially, what you have are 3 Carrie Anerson stones in the rings and 1 Silvana Tirinzoni stone in the rings. And the question is, what do you do? Do you draw in with Val Sweetings and sit 2 or 3, or do you try hitting and sitting 4? And the issue is that over around 3 o'clock, you have the Silvana Tirinzoni stone basically top 4 foot ish in the 12 foot, but on that sort of height, and a Carrie Anerson stone in the back 8 foot, back 4 foot, back 8 foot range. So there's about 3 or 4 feet between the 2 stones, creating a jam possibility. There was a brief discussion. Ultimately, the team decided, well, why don't we sit 4? I was kind of on team Joan McCusker here, saying, you don't want to jam it. This is kind of risky. And then kind of falls apart for Carrie Anerson the rest of the way. They score a single point, came against the draw against 3, I think. But the end kind of falls apart when Val Sweeting does jam. Scott, I thought this was an interesting strategy decision and a question of, do you draw? Do you leave that stone alone, sit multiple, or do you try and get super aggressive and sit 4?
Well, the thing is, like, they could have sat 3 just by playing the draw.
Yeah.
And is sitting 3 versus sitting 4, like, I think, like, if they made the shot they were going to make, there probably would have been a double there. So 3 would have been the most anyway. And like you say, that was really dangerous to try and hit that. Both of them said, oh, the hit was my first thought.
Yeah.
But then it seemed like they were going to play the draw. And then maybe the front end talked Val out of it. I don't know, but maybe she talked herself out of it. And yeah, they decided to play the tougher shot. Now, at the end of the day, it's all execution, right? Like, if they make the shot that they're trying to, again, I don't know if it's great. There's a double there with a chance to roll underneath the ones on the other side of the house. Tough, but the way Alina Pats was playing yesterday, definitely doable. So, yeah, I feel like this is a 50% strategy error and a 50% execution error, because it was Val's last. You mentioned you weren't sure. It was. And so there's not a lot of rocks left. Yeah, sitting 4 is great, but you're down 2. And probably at the beginning of the end, you said getting 2 is really good.
Yeah.
The only way that you're not going to get 2 is if you make some kind of error where you jam. So they jammed that one, and then it ended up on the next that they were facing 2.
Yeah.
Like, it was just a really, really tough spin on the end. What was your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I agree, because you're not in all likelihood going to score 4 points. And as
Yeah.
you say, the benefit of sitting 4 is somewhat mitigated by the fact that where you roll, if you make your shot, sets up a pretty easy double. So
Yeah.
the benefit of sitting 4 in that moment is minimal. This is one of these things too that I think comes up at our level a lot, where people are like, oh, let's sit as many as we can right now. Or,
Yeah.
oh, we have to be shot right now. When you don't, you only count once all the stones have been thrown. You don't have to be shot after every single shot that you throw. Like, that's not a requirement. And drawing it in, sitting the 3, making it more difficult too for Tirinzoni to remove that stone. Because if you draw over, and maybe you don't want to get too cute with the corner freeze on the Tirinzoni stone, but if you put it in that direction, at least, it's just something that's in her way. She probably is going to play the double on the other side anyway. And then you have 2 stones in the rings to her 1. And then maybe you have a scenario where you can work a 3 with those because there's that extra shrapnel in the way. I don't know, but let her play on the other side, have your 2 stones on the right side of the rings, and then see what happens. It just felt too much in that moment, like trying to get too much out of the shot.
Even like on the other side, on the left-hand side, they were partially guarded stones, right? So it wasn't just an easy double on that side either.
Mm-hmm.
So she's going to be playing the rock that you throw next. Rather than set up an easy double, try to draw it in there and give it like a chance to jam.
Yeah.
If she tries to hit it. So yeah, I think in the immediate moment, I was like, okay, yeah, sit 4. But thinking more about it, the risks that go along with that shot probably outweigh any benefit you get if you do make it perfectly.
Yeah, I agree. You're just, it was, now if it's no chance of a jam, sure. But it's the fact that the jam was such a possibility, and that the 2 stones were just perfectly lined up. And I guess you could have picked it, but again, there's no real benefit to that. So
exactly.
Yeah. So I was kind of in the moment, I was thinking, like, because Joan McCusker didn't like it in the moment. Joan McCusker was like, I think he's just come in and sit 3. And I was kind of on team Joan in the moment as the shot was coming down, and then of course the jam. And then you have a situation again 5 minutes later where Kerry has to draw against a potential multiple steal, and they had to sweep it really hard. Harris and Burchard had to sweep it post to post just to get a top 8 foot to avoid the big steal. And so you're going from a situation where, like you say, I mean, execution obviously is part of it. It's not just purely a strategy decision there, but if you play it differently, or frankly, if you make the shot you call, you probably still are going to score at least a 2 there.
Yeah.
So the miss makes you go from a tie game halfway through to down 1 halfway through without the hammer. And after that, it never really felt like they were going to get back into it. I felt for the rest of the game. So tough one there. And that was because they didn't, at least Val and Kerry didn't play up to what you normally expect from them. They were a little lower on percentages and some curious misses here and there, again, based on the level that they have set for themselves. They just didn't hit that yesterday. And frankly, neither did Silvana Tirinzoni. She didn't have the greatest of games yesterday. Elena Pats played well, as did the front end for Kerry Einarson and Harrison Burchard. They certainly outplayed their opposition, but ultimately, that's cute, but it's the back end.
And like you say, they don't count points till the end. So when the skipper's throwing good rocks, it's tough to beat.
Yeah. So, and I say that as a front end player too. That's why I like playing front end. I can play poorly. Doesn't really matter. I can play well. Doesn't really matter. I mean, it matters.
Yeah.
But, not as much as the stones that are thrown later.
Yeah, absolutely.
So those are a couple of the curious strategy decisions that came out of the weekend that we just wanted to talk about. Let us know what you think of those moments, or any other big strategic moments over the course of the weekend that we missed out on or should potentially discuss moving forward? Scott, anything else out of North Bay? I'll just say I was a little surprised at the number of good seats that were still available through the playoffs, through there. I thought there'd be more of a crowd there in North Bay. Now, again, it's not the World Championship, and they really turned out for the World Championship. So who knows? It's still, COVID is still a thing. So that could have depressed crowds a little bit. Also a holiday weekend. And I know a lot of people from my experience in North Bay go to other places on that weekend. So a variety of factors that could have been in play there. But I was just a little surprised at that. I was also surprised to see the Pinty's Pub is no more, Scott. It has been replaced by the Pinty's Eat Well Zone. How do you feel about that change?
Don't like it, Sean. I don't go to curling to eat well. I go to curling to eat chicken wings and drink beer in the Pinty's Pub. I don't know. They're promoting their new line, right? So, call it whatever they like. Just don't call me late for dinner. Oof. The Pinty's Pub, when I went to a Grand Slam event in Victoria, they ran out of chicken wings. So brutal. Hopefully the Eat Well Zone will not run out of food for all of the patrons there. Still a great view of the curling, great view of the game.
But now it's just, I don't even know. Is it just like all organic stuff? Like
must be, yeah.
I don't know. Everything grilled, no fried anything.
Water, no beer, water.
Yeah. I don't know. It doesn't. The thing is, I realize it's just a promotion, and ultimately it doesn't really matter. It just doesn't roll off the tongue as well, right? Like, like you say, we're hanging out in the Pinty's Pub. You're like, oh, that sounds pretty cool. Like, that sounds fun. We're gonna go hang out in the Pinty's Eat Well Zone. I think I'll stay in my seat. I'm good.
I think so, Sean. I think so. Yeah, the alliteration with Pinty's Pub. The P sound is nice and hard, so it can punctuate the sentence. Yeah.
And a pub, like it just, the word pub, it denotes like fun, collegiality. You're chatting, you're having a good time. Like if the pub is good, that's what should be happening. An Eat Well Zone, I don't really know what that is.
Yeah, a pub, it's short for public house, right?
Yeah.
Like a house for the public. So, yeah.
Even if they call it the Pinty's Eat Well Pub.
Sure.
Right.
Better.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're just getting old, I guess, complaining about these things.
I know. So that was another thing out of North Bay. Anything else, Scott, though, that you wanted to talk about?
Well, I'll just keep harping on the Grand Slam of curling, but they sure are making it hard to watch replays of this stuff. Like, I have Sportsnet now. I log in and I can watch the 2-minute highlight package of all the draws. I can't watch the full thing, which it also just like is kind of annoying because if you want people to watch this and they're not able to do it because, I don't know, it's Thanksgiving weekend. If there's no way for me to catch up on it, then why do I care about the next one? Right? Like, anyway. And a lot of them were on Sportsnet 360 or just online. A lot of the draws. So again, tough for the audience that curling draws, but I don't know. I just found it that I wasn't able to watch it when I wanted to very easily. So I kind of gave up.
Yeah.
I did watch a bit. Like I didn't not watch curling all weekend, but could have been easier.
Yeah. And you see this with Curling Canada events that for the most part, they're up on YouTube. If it's a morning draw, sometimes later that day, but usually the next day, those draws are up. And even though they don't get a lot of views, even if it's, 3,000-4,000, that's worth it, right? In the sport of this size to put it up. And I think, Sportsnet owns the Grand Slams. They are a major communications company and they have an online way to watch games that they want you to pay for. So why not put the games up after they're over? I don't understand that.
And like on on the service that I'm already paying for.
Yeah.
So,
like I understand if you don't want to put it on YouTube, if you're Sportsnet
Yeah.
or Grand Slam, yeah, sure. Like don't put it on YouTube. Make people pay for that. Like if they're not going to watch it when it's on TV and you want to drive some people, I don't know how many people are going to be driven to Sportsnet now just for the curling, but if it's more than 0, then it's worth it.
exactly. So anyway, that's just another in my series of, I guess, complaining about the Grand Slam.
So there you have it. It was a fun weekend overall, I think, in North Bay. And congratulations to Brad Gushue, Silvana Tirinzoni. One other thing before we go, a lot of discussion this past week, both online and certainly in the real world about what's been going on in the United States. The National Women's Soccer League. The Yates report came out last week about what happened in the NWSL over the past few seasons. As it relates to curling, Jeff Plush is now in charge of USA Curling, and he is a prominent figure in the Yates report. And certainly there are significant and I think very valid questions about whether or not Jeff Plush should be leading another sports organization. And USA Curling to this point has not really come out with anything. This is something that we are obviously going to follow. For the moment, I would just recommend Ryan and Jonathan on Rocks Across the Pond. They released an episode on Friday discussing in a little more detail what's in the Yates report as it relates to Jeff Plush. Some of the background work they did before they interviewed Jeff Plush as well. They mentioned that. And I would echo their sentiment that the situation is both enraging to read about, the ineffectual leadership at the NWSL, and that somebody who's in a position of leadership there now has a position of leadership in curling. And also there's a sadness to it for the people who were subjected to this treatment, that it hasn't been addressed in an adequate way. So that's what I have to say about this for now. And we'll try to follow up with it as this situation develops. But check out Ryan and Jonathan, if you have not yet, on Rocks Across the Pond for the situation with USA Curling, which, I tweeted the other day that, to put it extremely mildly, USA Curling has had a bad 6 months.
Yeah, absolutely. Very well said. And I'll echo your sentiment for the Rocks Across the Pond podcast. Good coverage of it there.
Yeah. And we'll say too, it's not really anything against the players either. Like Corey Dropkin and his team, they're just out there playing. And it's unfortunate that they have to do this in the backdrop of all this too. Same with Team Peterson, who is there in North Bay. So we'll monitor that over the next little while and see what comes of it. So with that, we will say thank you very much for listening, everybody. If you have not yet, please do subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcast. Do the likes and ratings, comments, all that good stuff. Helps other people find the show, keeps us growing. You can also head on over to GameOfStonesPod.com. All of our past episodes are available under the episode tab, and you can, of course, click on the merch. I am eagerly awaiting my hoodie, which, according to Canada Post, should be here later this week. Of course, we are going to donate all of the proceeds from the merch to Food Banks Canada and the Sandra Schmirler Foundation and match those as well. And of course, you can follow along with everything we got going on at Game of Stones Pod on Twitter and Instagram, Game of Stones Podcast on Facebook, and you can always reach out, GameofStonesPodcast@gmail.com. So, Scott, it is Thanksgiving. What are you thankful for here as we celebrate our thanks?
Well, I'm thankful for a lot of things, Sean. I'm thankful that I had a pretty good season of Blue Jays baseball to watch. That, as devastating as the ending is, it's like it's like something that's there every day over the summer, and it's part of my routine. I know we talked in the pandemic year how hard it was without that sort of rhythm of the calendar. So you know what? I'm thankful for them. I'm thankful for the team. They brought me a lot of joy this year, and looking forward to next year already.
There you go. Brooklyn Dodgers. There's always next.
There's always next year.
Yeah, we are only a smooth 6 months away from opening day. A little less actually than 6 months away from opening day, Scott.
Yep. And I was looking at their roster already today, so seeing what needs to change, what can change, and who's leaving, who's going, who's coming.
It'll be an interesting winter on that front for sure, as it will be an interesting winter as we get through the rest of the curling season. So please do join us for that, and it'll start next week. So until we talk then, keep those brooms on the ice and don't dump that intern.
Make the final.